This episode is made possible by NetSuite by Oracle and Brex, the AI-powered spend platform.
Hi, this is Akash Palkhiwala. I'm CFO of Qualcomm, and you're listening to CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 1009.
Medline presented a lot more opportunities to kind of be at the front and center, right on the front lines of particularly M&A. That's where I spent a lot of my time. Medline became very acquisitive, and you weren't part of some big team. You weren't a cog in a wheel, which can happen at big companies for good reasons. They have to be structured that way. At Medline, it was me and a couple others, and we were very much, all over the entire process, whether it was, due diligence or negotiating the purchase agreement and dealing with the lawyers and bankers, et cetera. And, got a front row seat to that, which was great. And I don't think I would have gotten it if I had stayed in an environment like GE's.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Tony Querciagrossa, CFO of Pinstripes. Two and a half years ago, CFO Tony Querciagrossa began a discussion with Dale Schwartz, founder of the experiential dining up-and-comer Pinstripes. That last fall led Querciagrossa to join the dining establishment as CFO. Turn back the clock, and Pinstripes, aiming for a traditional IPO, had engaged Goldman Sachs to solidify its path towards a permanent capital structure. However, the emergence of the Omicron variant disrupted these plans, placing the IPO on hold. What happened next? And how does Querciagrossa, a GE audit veteran, enter the picture? You'll learn on today's episode. We'll begin after this. CFOs and controllers, does expense management feel like a necessary evil? It's time to switch to Brex. Brex automates and accelerates spend management with easy-to-use corporate cards, travel, expense management, and bill pay, all on one AI-powered platform. Brex makes it easy to boost efficiency and compliance enterprise-wide and free up your managers, employees, and accounting team for higher impact work. Top companies from startups to enterprises are using Brex to automate manual work and transform their finance operations. We're talking DoorDash, Robinhood, Airtable, and countless other industry leaders. Ready to join them? Switch to AI-powered spend management at Brex.com. Hi, we're speaking with Tony Querciagrossa, CFO of Pinstripes. Tony, welcome.
Hey, Jack. Thanks for having me.
So, Tony, as always, we're going to begin by asking you to look back in time for us. We were looking back at your bio, so we're always intrigued by some of the companies you were part of. But take us back in time and tell us what those experiences were that you feel prepared you for this role.
Yeah, several. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into the journey of a career, but there's a few key things I'll share. So, one is great foundational experience in finance, and that was really at GE. In their rotational development program, which has been around more than a century, still is around, even though they've split into three companies, from what I understand. And then audit staff as well, which is not around, but has quite a storied history as well. Just great foundational leadership programs. And then being a part of something like GE where, finance is done right and it's done at scale. Super important. Another experience is when I left GE, I realized that having a great step outside job from an experience like GE is important for long-term success. if you're going to go into a different type of environment. So when I went to Medline, it was a growing company. I was private at the time, and but was still pretty large, but very entrepreneurial. Right.
And I didn't know this. 20 billion in annual revenue, Medline, something like that.
I think it's 22 now, but it was 6.5 when I started there.
Wow.
So it was 6.5 when I started, and about 5 years later, it was about 11 billion. So it nearly doubled in size during my time there, and I think now is the third largest LBO ever.
Well,
so
I want to point out 6 years at GE and then 4.5 at Medline. So you're making that investment along the way.
Yeah, of course.
And at Medline, I'm sorry, that's where you advance into a CFO role for North America. Is that right?
Correct. So I had a lot of decision support in that role, supporting both the divisions as well as the functions, and then played kind of a corporate FP&A role in that job as well, because North America was most of the business at Medline at the time.
And, as our listeners know, I always like to drill down on our GE veterans, just because it's a company so many of us are curious about, has a little bit of intrigue around it. I'm wondering about, was there a time where you were tapped on the shoulder to present to a more senior group, and I'm sure there might be lots of little instances, but I'm wondering if anything comes to mind when I put it that way. Was there a time where you were put on the spot where you had to actually step into a conference room or present to a larger, more senior group? Anything come to mind?
I mean, all the time. When you're on audit staff, that's one of the ways they develop you is you do a lot of executive communication, right? It's talking to senior leaders of businesses, whether it's at corporate or one of the segments. And the further you progress in audit staff, the more that becomes kind of a key, important part of your role. And so it certainly at times was nerve-wracking. I think right near the end of my career, you actually started presenting to the audit committee, which was a new aspect, which brought it to a whole new level. I mean, you were presenting to people who were storied, business leaders.
What is the back and forth there? Are they asking you tough questions? Or are they? You have to be pretty tactful, I think, when you step into that room.
Yeah, I think you have to balance your messaging, right? You don't want to. You want to get to the facts and kind of what remember you're in an audit capacity, so right. you were kind of giving sort of constructive criticism in many cases of processes and controls in the business, but you had to support it with facts. So a lot of times it was, okay, I hear you, but tell me why and give me the facts as to why you take that position. And you had to balance. And frankly, if you couldn't do that, you were called out. And in fact, I think you've had some guests on here that regularly called me out. So it was fun. I won't name names, but they would regularly, hit me pretty good. It was great learning. I mean, great learning experience.
Yeah. And what is the nature of it? What is the, again, that is great learning. I mean, that's where it begins, where as you advanced into industry and began taking on challenges there, you're going to be stepping before the board. Am I right about that? Is there a direct parallel, would you say?
Absolutely. And I think, too, you're challenged. You're not given a lot of time. There's a lot going on. You're dealing with people who are relatively high level, right? So you have to be able to, put together a strong message, but be succinct, right? And that's a skill that I was thankful I got to learn in that environment because it serves me to this day. I mean, certainly in this role, because when you're talking to investors or you're talking to our board, you have to be able to do the same things, right? So got a lot of practice.
I want to ask you about being an auditor and, within GE, the GE brand, I'm sure there were recruiters and what have you, but when you do step in industry, it would seem to me you're looking for opportunities to demonstrate your FP&A savvy, demonstrate how you can be a future finance leader, frankly, a future CFO. How am I doing, or would you see the world differently?
I mean, certainly a lot of times when you're on audit staff at GE, you were interviewing for a role. Um, especially when as you got to the latter end of that journey, right? And so, you still had to keep your audit hat on, but you also wanted to give strategic insight. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you seen? We just saw this. It was part of the audit, but it maybe isn't an audit finding, but it's hey, it can impact the quarter, it can impact something more longer term. So
You're already headed into that strategic sort of mindset. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, while you were independent, right, and rightfully so, um, you still were by many of the people in the organization considered to be sort of quasi part of the team, maybe in a different light, but you were still, hey, bring me some interesting stuff to talk about. Don't just come to me with just an audit log, right? So there was a lot of that, particularly as you got to the more senior parts of audit staff. It was really a great experience.
So Medline, like we were discussing, it's a pretty sizable supplier today. Back then, as you described, it was really roughly around $6 billion.
It was about $6.5 billion when I started. Yeah, growing in excess of 10% a year, which is a much different environment than GE.
What were you thinking when you left GE? What were you looking for? And I'm sure there were other options, and this one was undoubtedly an attractive one. But at that place in your career, what is it that you're looking for?
So, I left GE for personal reasons. So my mom got cancer; she's fine now, but I wanted to be closer to Chicago. At the time, GE didn't have a lot in Chicago, and so I, just kind of kept my ears open in the Chicago network, and Medline was headquartered in Chicago. I was pretty familiar with the, at least the company name.
Yeah.
And so it allowed me to not have to move backwards, but be closer to my mom. Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you for sharing that. Too often on this podcast and others, too often we don't reveal the fact that professional life and personal life are one and the same, and we don't do a good job of explaining some of the choices and trade-offs that are very often made. And to me, on paper, that looks like an ideal career jump, but there's always so much more involved. When you do get there, are you missing any of the GE training? Are you're in just a corporate environment now that's...
Well, I'd say, look, if it weren't for the personal side of it, right, I would have stayed at GE. And I think the one thing you miss by not staying is I would have gotten more time to work with a lot of really great finance and business professionals that have both stayed at GE and done incredible things. I mean, what they've done in the last year has been nothing short of remarkable. And then some people have left and they're in huge jobs and, really exciting companies. And so I, think the stay would have been good to continue to be in the, around those folks. But, when Medline presented a lot more opportunities to kind of be at the front and center, right on the front lines of particularly M&A. That's where I spent a lot of my time. Medline became very acquisitive when I joined, and you weren't part of some big team. You weren't a cog in a wheel, which can happen at big companies for good reasons. They have to be structured that way. At Medline, it was me and a couple others, and we were very much, all over the entire process, whether it was, due diligence or, negotiating the purchase agreement and dealing with, the lawyers and bankers, et cetera. And, got a front row seat to that, which was great. And I don't think I would have gotten it if I had stayed in an environment like GE. So that's the Medline opportunity provided, instances like that for sure.
When you do leave Medline, you step into a CFO role, and I'll point out to the listeners that you've had multiple CFO roles today, and we'll be talking to you about Pinstripes just a few minutes here. But when you do step into that role, was it a recruiter? Who brings you in that first time, or is it part of your network?
The former CFO of Medline that hired me at Medline left and went to Madison and Filtration Group. and I reached out to him and kept in contact, and it was the right time to leave Medline, and he pulled me over and introduced me to Filtration Group. So.
And is that where you enter the CFO office? Do you do that right away, or is that?
Yeah, so I was CFO of the Indoor Air Quality Group, Filtration Group, which was 6 or 7, indoor air quality related filter companies that Filtration Group had acquired over the years.
And you've been in manufacturing. You were at GE. You don't think of yourself as industry specific, or do you?
Not anymore.
I
spent a lot of time at GE in their aerospace business, particularly at the end. Then at Medline, it's healthcare, and it's not just manufacturing; it's also distribution.
Yeah.
And then at Filtration Group, very much manufacturing with some distribution, and then at Pinstripes, it's totally new industry, right? So hospitality, restaurant, which I've never been in any capacity until.
Let me ask you. We'll ask you then about Pinstripes, and I just want to mention we might have a few more career-related questions a little later in the podcast,
Sure.
But just permit us. Tell us about Pinstripes. What is this company about? What does it do? What are its offerings?
So we're a best-in-class entertainment destination. And we lead with food and beverage. So we have phenomenal food, Scratch Kitchen, with timeless entertainment in bowling and bocce. We're very much not a bowling alley with food, but quite the opposite. So, very unique, high quality experience, that's growing a lot.
I just Googled the name of it before we came on, of course, and I see they're across the country, or how many are there today?
So there's 17 open today. We'll have 2 more open shortly here in the next few months. And then we've got a pipeline of quite a few more, all leading to hopefully 150 in the United States, over time. We believe that's the opportunity.
And what is you use the word entertainment, the concept is, combining great food with entertaining activity. Yep.
The world, certainly post-COVID, wants to interact and engage and not just eat food, but also have the ability to bowl or play bocce. And we like those sports because they're timeless. They've been around forever and they continue to endure. And they're great activities to also eat and drink with, right? You don't have to stop and do the activity. You can do both at the same time, which is great. I think most people enjoy it. And, we've got a fairly large, kind of open play business. And then we do a lot of private events. So 50% of the business is private events, which is also unique for Pinstripes.
Now, you mentioned COVID, and I know that was a chapter that Pinstripes had to navigate through. It was before your time, we realized, but can you go back in time and just share with us, what exactly had to transpire to get you where you are now?
Well, from a Pinstripes perspective, the whole industry, right, just had a huge hole ripped in it by COVID. And luckily, the government stepped up, right, with PPP and other programs, which were absolutely necessary for the industry.
The timing there, though, from what I read,
Yep.
The roadshow was underway in early 2020.
Yeah, so actually, I talked to Dale about joining Pinstripes about 2.5 years before I did. So it was during COVID was ending, but it was before Omicron hit, right? To use the kind of these COVID milestones. He had engaged Goldman Sachs and was going to do a traditional IPO, right? It was always his goal. He wanted to have a permanent capital structure. And when Omicron hit, it put all that on ice. And then you fast forward after came out of COVID, made limoncello out of lemons, as Dale likes to say, working through the Omicron situation, got introduced to Banyan, which was a SPAC. Wasn't, what Dale had initially envisioned. He envisioned a traditional IPO, But the Banyan team was, industry operators, knew the space, invested $21 million before the D-SPAC, so heavily committed, and with capital. And then I joined right as sort of all of it, the business combination agreement had been signed, and the second roadshow, so to speak, was starting to go, raise more capital to D-SPAC. And so that's when I joined. So I came in very much in a moment where it was lightning in a bottle, so to speak. A lot had to happen over a very short period of time.
Can I ask, where did you cross paths with Dale first?
Actually, I know our lead director, Jack Greenberg, through a mutual connection, and just came up a few years ago. Hey, going down the CFO path and be a public company CFO that do an IPO. These are hard boxes to check. If you're not that I'm really a box checker, but they're hard experiences to get, right? So I was very intrigued. 2.5 years ago or so, when Dale was looking at a traditional IPO. The timing wasn't right for me to leave Filtration Group in Madison at the time. So I stayed and, did some great things there, but came back once the SPAC was in place and the timing was right. And like I said, very much wanted to be the lightning in a bottle kind of concept was good because it was a great challenge. You had to go do a lot to get ready to be a public company in a very short period of time.
Something that crossed my mind when we were initially talking was, what surprises me a little bit. Not every GE auditor would be as entrepreneurial, wouldn't have that entrepreneurial itch, which I don't know if you like this being characterized like that, but when you reflect on your career, this is something a little more adventurous, or would you put it another way for us?
I would say, it started with Medline, right? Like, going into a more entrepreneurial environment got me acquainted with how that can feel, and I really liked it. I left finance when I was at Filtration Group, did a couple of general management roles, so ran businesses, and I did all that to be a better operational CFO long term. Like, I sat in the chair, I know what it feels like, and I know what I have a different perspective. I think the more you do that, you become less kind of big corporate, being part of something really big that's got, global prominence, and being a part of something that's more situational and like you said, entrepreneurial for sure.
SPACs have gotten some bad press. You saw things differently.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think certainly SPACs, had an interesting time in 2020, 2021, and probably were overused or, not properly used. Became a 4-letter word, literally. And so, that certainly at first maybe, kind of crossed my mind. But when you look at Banyan, they had industry experience. They invested capital in the business, whether the D-SPAC was going to happen or not. So it was a much different situation. And when we did the roadshow, we got a lot of questions about why SPAC, why everything's situational, right? And raising capital in this environment is tough. The SPAC is a good vehicle, and it was the right situation for Pinstripes. It's not always the right situation for everybody, though.
Tony, I want to share I'm looking into your office behind you, and I see boxes. I see a very entrepreneurial environment behind you.
We office out of our venues. So I'm in Northbrook, and Dale sits in Northbrook, and we don't have a corporate office somewhere. We're with our teams, which is important.
So when you arrive, again, this is a smaller environment, and we're always clued in that your lines of sight into the business, the restaurant business, keeping tabs on customers, perhaps through, and I don't know, are mobile technologies involved here? How are you keeping tabs on your customers digitally?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll broaden it out a little bit, Jack. First, so from a finance perspective, from my perspective, coming from manufacturing and distribution, obviously your customers are B2B typically, even though I was involved with consumer businesses. So you always want to understand the experience of the consumer. But here it's on steroids. I mean, we always say the last 10 feet is the hardest. And so making sure that is really tight, and you can check through reviews and, digital touch points that we get with customers. We're talking about launching a loyalty program, right? At some point, that's another way to kind of get those touch points. But coming out of the manufacturing distribution world, one thing that popped out to me, and I think anybody that listens that's in a manufacturing world is, the amount of labor in your business is fundamentally different here and more than a manufacturing business. Manufacturing business might be 10 to 15%, and that is doesn't matter if it's made in the United States or somewhere else in the world. That's typically around where it's at. Here it's like 30 to 40%. And so it's a quickly a different dynamic around what matters. And so having great visibility into how many people are working and when, and coupling that with service is important. And so I quickly honed in on that and wanting to say, okay, we need to know every day that we win, both from a service and delivery perspective, but also, from a labor perspective. And we're also open a lot more than typical businesses. We're open over 360 days a year. And so daily management, which is very popular, from a lean perspective, any lean business is very popular. It has so much relevance in a business like this. And so I've taken a lot of what I learned in manufacturing distribution around daily management and helped deploy it in our business. And so we look at just a few KPIs and what is cleverly called a bowler. The bowler term did not come from me. It came from the manufacturing world. Fits so well with our business, though, given we have bowling and bocce. And so we look at it every day. So it's been great. Great win, I think, for the finance function to implement that early on.
It would seem to me that you get larger groups of people.
Yeah, our average ticket size is like $40 a person. So that's higher than, some other, quasi peers in the industry, for sure.
Is there a geography that in particular where it took root first, or is
Chicago? So, our first location was in Northbrook 17, 18 years ago. And then, we like to cluster. So we have 4 locations in the Chicagoland area. And we're doing that in other places. In Miami, we're going to have 2 here real soon. We're going to have 2 and, potentially have 5 in San Francisco area, et cetera. So we'll have 2 in the Seattle area by the end of next year. It started in the Midwest, which was a good place to start, but we go everywhere, right? So we're not in the weather business. We don't need to worry about that. We're in Minnesota, we're in Texas, we're in California, Florida, Northeast, wherever.
Now, who would be the finance report on premise in a restaurant? Granted, I don't know if you have finance people at every restaurant. I don't think so, but generally a general manager might have certain responsibilities that report into you, or
our general managers absolutely have to have a finance hat on at times. They're certainly our key point of contact in every venue, and represent. They own the P&L. The GM job here is probably the most important job that we have, just given the relative importance, right? Some of our venues are producing millions of dollars of EBITDA. And so that's a very important leadership role. Now we've got a regional structure that sits over it. So we're built to scale, and we got great systems. So, when I stepped into a company like this, I would have expected the systems landscape to be challenged, and that would be a place where I'd have to spend a lot of my time. It's been quite the opposite. We've got some of the best systems that you can have, Salesforce.com, Restaurant 365, and they're all standardized. There's nothing custom, so it's all off the shelf. And so, when people start talking about things like AI, we'll be ready from a systems perspective and be able to leverage a lot more, assuming our data and processes have caught up, which that's kind of where I've been spending some of my time with the team, versus just talking about what could AI do for the business as an example.
Curious, since you've been there, if there was a particular number or metric that you have sought to expose more frequently to the general managers, or educate them a little differently as to why the number is more strategic than they may have thought.
I think this business has always tracked a lot of data. There's like almost too much data. You can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak. And so a lot of my time has been, okay, what are the 3 or 4 key metrics? So it's same store sales growth, it's front of house and back of house labor, it's salaried headcount, and then what's your store level EBITDA at the end of the day, right? So I've got 4 things I just rattled off, and then seeing them versus last year and versus a budget, right? A target that was missing, believe it or not. Like you could go get it, but it wasn't on a single sheet of paper. Like it wasn't easily accessible, and as you might imagine, general managers have a lot of ground to cover, and so that's where I've spent my time, is like just seeing it in a way that, okay, the data is all there, but it's displayed in a way that makes sense, and whether or not you won a week or a month or the quarter.
Was there and it's displayed in a way that makes sense? I see a dashboard where maybe Tony made a certain number suddenly more prominent or lowered one. I don't know. No.
Yeah. No, I mean, certainly the KPI bowler that we've rolled out, certainly, yeah, it was definitely my team that, kind of pushed that initiative. And very much the team knows that.
Well, you touched on AI very quickly there for us. I'm curious if there's something more there as you guys have brainstormed, as you talked about, where is it going to help you? Could be the AI advantage for this type of business?
So AI, I think just broadly, right, is going to transform the finance function. Everybody knows this. Basic activities like variance analysis and, even just common three-way match, et cetera, just going to be taken over by AI. I think where we've spent time is our data and process that's going to flow into all that ready for prime time. And, the answer is no. I mean, in a business of our size, we can't afford to just take a swing on AI, even though it could greatly benefit us and help us scale and grow. I mean, because we're growing so much. But we can't afford to swing and miss. So we've spent a lot of time on the data and the process, because I think the more I learn about the AI functionality that's quickly emerging in our, from various vendors, right, is if you don't have good data and good process, you're just going to waste your money and waste the team's time and potentially impact, ever getting it implemented fully, because people won't believe you. We've tried this before. It's not going to work. AI is not the answer. I think, that's the bigger risk.
Organizationally, since you arrived, is there something related to the data? Did you make a hire in the data realm, a data scientist of some kind, or that might be too strong?
No, I think on the process side, we've completely added to and upgraded our controllership function, right? Okay. Becoming a public company, we certainly need to have SEC reporting capability. We've leveraged a few tools that have really helped us, be able to do that well. But my controller, who, has got a lot of great experience, she's got a lot of process mindset, and her team is developing new processes, which has been great. So not a data person per se. Yeah. Like I said, there's always been a lot of data in this business, right, and, pretty good systems. But the process and the controllership side is where we've upgraded and added.
Okay. So we're going to jump to our finance strategic moment question, where we ask you to look back and share just one moment, strategic insight that you've experienced along the way? Might have happened last week, might have happened 15 years ago. Anything come to mind?
Yeah. So when I was at Medline, we were saying that we're trying to transform finance from being a part of the group that kind of keeps the score to somebody that's playing in the game and helping make the score, right? And my strategic moment was when I was sitting with one of the commercial leaders. And Medline to this day continues to be a very commercially driven organization. So they're at the forefront and they kind of run the business for the most part. I sat with him and we were talking about just ways to get more involved, and inevitably it always come back to like expense management and reporting and then I noticed that he was recruiting for an analyst on his own. And I said, yeah, I think we can help you with that. We could get a better qualified candidate. They'll have access to more data and tools, and you don't need to worry about keeping them happy because I got 30 other jobs that they'll be able to tap into in their career. And so you don't need to worry about organizational management. And that's when the commercial finance function was born at Medline. And what it realized to me is, hey, if you want to get a ton of support from the leaders of a business and you want to be a real partner, you need to solve the problems of your business partners. And in that case, it was people and functionality, and it wasn't just some report or data or expense management. We were literally handling an organizational issue for that leader and an important leader in the business. So, that's where I from there on out, I always keep that at the forefront of my mind about, yeah, if you keep that mentality as a finance leader, you'll be a great business partner.
37,000, 25, 1. These are the three numbers to remember to get the visibility and control you need to make the right business decisions instantly. 37,000. That's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down expenses. 1. Because your business is one of a kind, you should get a customized solution for all of your KPIs in one efficient system and with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need, all in one place. Right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance, absolutely free, at netsuite.com/KPI. That's netsuite.com/KPI. Excellent insight for us. Thank you for that. We're going to move to our mentoring round, where we'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We want you to think back the first time you stepped into a CFO role where all the responsibilities fell on your shoulders. So not necessarily a unit CFO, but a CFO who had to report to the board, a CFO who was going to, sign off on the numbers for the company at large. All of those responsibilities fell on you. We're thinking there must have been something when you first stepped into that role, even with all the experience you had, there must have been something you wish someone had told you. And we're now going to allow you to go back in time and tell yourself this. What would it be?
I think, getting the advice early on that, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And sometimes you can take a little bit longer and not necessarily have the answer, is advice that I wish I would have been given sooner. It seems pretty obvious, but when you're younger in particular, you get the advice to kind of just rapidly move fast and get things done, and And then when you get into when you're the CFO, you kind of sometimes need to slow the organization down, right? And say, hey, it's okay to be a little bit slower because we've got to get this right. And so advice, I think I didn't get a lot of that in my younger years, so to speak.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought. Very often you're boarding a moving train. It's not just about speed. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. We're wondering if there's something that most people don't know about you, something you've done in the past, something you enjoy. I don't know.
I'll give two things. I like EDM music, which I don't know where that puts me on the CFO music genre scale, but I like EDM music. And I was a contestant on the grand prize game on Bozo Buckets when I was 3 years old.
Oh, here we go. Now that is, where was that? What network carried that?
WGN. Yeah, it was very Midwest. I grew up in Chicago. And I was on the grand prize game when I was 3 years old. My brother taped over the only tape that I know exists of it. I have offered $10,000 anyone that can produce the tape. Haven't had anyone come forward, and they don't keep archives, I'm told.
How many minutes of fame were there? Was it?
I think it may have hit almost 5 because I made it to the third bucket.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He's kept my age,
That's a small percentage, I think. All right. So we always like to know if you have a book selection for us. Doesn't have to be a business book. It might be something you enjoy or an interest you pursue.
I recommend The Founder's Mentality. It really talks about, kind of being closer to the point of impact. It talks about, businesses that struggle to grow. They think it's the market and all that, and it's really internally you need to, spend more time on the customer and spend more time on more of the front line because the front line matters, right? I talked about, the last 10 feet in this business are the hardest. And so that book is, I think, a great read for a CFO that wants to be a better decision support, business partner.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I don't think we've had it recommended before, oddly, so it's even better. Thank you. We're up to our final question where we're going to ask you to look forward finally. And we'd like to know what your priorities are as CFO going forward over the next 12 months. What would those be?
It's going to be get the firsts right, which is we've got a lot of firsts in this business coming up. First 10K, first proxy, first, sort of share owners meeting, a lot of firsts. And so our first full year fiscal guidance. And so we've got to get all that right. Finance is an integral part of that, all those processes. And so we've got a lot of firsts to get right here in the next 12 months.
Tony Querciagrossa, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Jack.
Hello, listeners. As you may know, we recently passed the 1,000 episode milestone. And the fact is, we've published well over 1,000 episodes over the years, but we only prescribe a number to episodes featuring CFOs because we know this is truly what has distinguished us over time. We're a platform dedicated to the people who actually occupy the CFO office, and to you, our listeners, who are very often seeking to better understand the roots of finance leadership. Well, it's with this in mind that we're pleased to announce the release of our new book titled The CFO 500, where we have profiled 500 of the more than 1,000 CFOs that have participated with us over the years. And you remember Siskel and Ebert, the movie guide? Leonard Moulton had his movie guide as well. Well, that's sort of the concept of what's inspired this volume, the CFO 500. Think of it as a reference volume where you can quickly thumb through the 500 one-page CFO profiles and cherry pick out the interviews that matter to you. How so? Well, each CFO page profile includes an individual QR code that allows you to instantly access the audio interview with the CFO that most intrigues you. Or maybe it's a particular industry. Just like that movie guide you used to reach to on a day when nothing much was going on, here's a way to quickly reference the interviews that matter most to you. The CFO 500 is now available for $29.95 and can only be purchased via CFOThoughtLeader.com. So visit us at CFOThoughtLeader.com. Thank you.